Topic here is the Cold War ends, looking at the 80s and what brings down the Soviet Union, crumbling empire, ending the Cold War. We may or may not watch the documentary soundtracks, which looks at the communist songs. They did a series on Vietnam. They did one on the civil rights movement, 9/11. So the soundtrack's an interesting documentary. You may or may not receive this homework assignment asking you to debrief the Cold War simulation. Let's see. How is the Cold War an ideological fight? Begin with Marx's concept. So this is the question that you're not going to be asked on an exam at the moment. Keep in mind, if you can read this question and have an understanding of what the question is asking, then I would say that you're probably at a point where you have some understanding of the Cold War. So for the most part, we're looking at the causes at the end of the war, these four right here, and we probably could add another one, the Soviet-Afghan War, which was addressed in a prior screencast. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 readings, each one pertaining to these items. The readings, I believe they can be found on the site. There they are. Here are the readings, basically looking at each one and contributing role that it plays. We already addressed this particular timeline. Again, just trying to give you an understanding of some of the issues going on during the Cold War. As we are transitioning into the 50s, 60s, really haven't introduced you to this timeline here. For this point, from this point on in the year, we'll be looking at the 50s and the 60s with the Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War. And I'm trying to get you to think about how all of these ideas, or all of these events, are kind of happening in the same time frame, and they're definitely picking up here, which is why I put the bracket there, which actually happens to be where all your projects are from. This particular time period right here, and they have connections to either the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War, or the Cold War. Again, that's be addressed at a later class. So the end of the Cold War, here are some of the causes. Detente and SALT, we already talked about the reduction of nuclear weapons. Detente is the cooling down period. I think I referenced an ice cube, trying to make this cool because the Cold War is a hot war. Reagan starts spending money on SDI. So the question here is, can the Soviets make a missile shield? If we have a missile shield and they do not have a missile shield, then we are winning the Cold War. The gap is one missile shield. I know that sounds stupid. That's kind of the way the Cold War is. Reagan's tough talk. Reagan in the 80s delivered his evil empire speech where he flat out called Russia the evil empire. So if he's calling you the evil empire and Russia, and you decide you're not going to respond, or in this case, Russia, then I would say that there is a gap. He's called you evil, you have called him nothing, which means there's a gap. What's the gap? I guess it's one nasty speech. Class notes, perestroika, these are policies, and these policies allow criticism in writing. And it's pretty much a scaling back of policies. So it's the Soviet Union reversing some of its authoritarian approaches to running a society. The end result is people are going to start criticizing, and these are policies that were put in place that Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union at this point, was supportive of. So these are just some of the contributing issues for this item here. All right, let's move on. Here we have another image of SDI, political cartoons, Khrushchev and JFK. Notice how they both have the button, which is going to lead to mutually assured destruction. Here we see Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev, the leaders during the 80s. Here we have, this is referenced in 1970, so I guess these are out of sequence with regard to time concern. This is a reference to the SALT treaties where they're agreeing to reduce nuclear weapons, but keeping weapons behind their back. And we probably cannot, look at the role of the Soviet-Afghan War, where the Soviet Union is investing heavily in the fight in the Afghan War, which prompts the United States to support the Mujahideen, which was addressed in the 9/11 screencast. So here we see an image of the Mujahideen fighting against the Soviet Union, which makes people like Abdullah Azzam as well as Osama bin Laden allies to the United States because they're trying to defeat the USSR, which is a contributing item for the Cold War coming to an end. So here we see Gorbachev and his policy of perestroika that is eventually going to cause the Soviet Union to collapse. Here we see another reference to the policies of glasnost and perestroika, where the open criticism of the government can now take place, which combine that with the Soviet-Afghan War, Reagan talking tough, which is what this political cartoon here is trying to show. Reagan putting a foot right through the brick wall, claiming tear down this wall in a speech. And let's see, this one's interesting. This looks like President Obama, the Soviet Union collapsing. And here we see Putin trying to hold up the former Soviet Empire, very similar to the domino theory. Again, we see Gorbachev, I guess, taking the blame for the collapse of the Soviet Union. Here we see the USSR and all of the lifeboats from its former empire. Another cartoon. There you go. And here are some clips that we possibly might want to take a look at that look at the decline of the Soviet Union, primarily in the 80s. So these will be things that we'll watch in class. Let's not forget Checkpoint Charlie, the physical divider, the the gatekeepers to east and west in Berlin. So for the most part, your responsibility. How did the Cold War come to an end? These four items, or this item being the actual physical barrier, but we could also throw the Soviet-Afghan War into the equation.